What's going on, Summoners? Welcome back to another ProGuides video. I'm Kangas, and today I'm talking about 5 sleeper OP picks and builds that you should be abusing for some free LP at the end of the season. You probably already know the popular OP picks and builds since they're all over social media, even our own YouTube channel, but in this video, we're looking at some of the lesser known builds and picks today. So hit that sub button and let's get right into it. Starting things off, we got Velka as a bot lane carry. Mages have been an incredibly strong alternative to the standard marksman in the bot lane for quite a while now, but Velka is definitely one of the lesser known ones. Like most other mages, the biggest pro to picking him is that he always has a wave clear to neutralize even the strongest laners by just shoving them into their turret and then poking them and bullying them out as they try and farm under it. The one weakness that having a mage in the bot lane usually comes with is a tougher time dealing with tanks. Usually AD carries are the ones that you need to kill tanks since they have consistent damage, but Velka is relatively fine in this area too. The true damage from his passive and ultimate allow him to melt through any target no matter how beefy they may be. And on top of that, lane is just relatively easy. You just shove with W and poke with Q, and if your opponents want to go aggro, use your E to disengage them, comboing for a quick passive proc as you wiggle your way back to safety. His super high range also allows you to be really safe when sieging and team fighting. Just keep going for poke on the enemy, using terrain and the fog of war to hide which way your barrage is coming from. And in team fights, make sure that there's a lot of space between you and the enemy threats. You don't need to position to kill the enemy backline. Like I said before, you will melt through their tanks just as easily, so make sure to take your time fighting front to back style. But with that said, let's take a look at the build that you'll be running. For runes, you want to take Arcane Comet, Mana Flow Band, Transcendence, Gathering Storm, Presence of Mind, and Coup de Grace, with the stat runes being double Adaptive Force and Armor. For your items, you want to start with a Doran's Ring and then start building towards your Luden's Tempest. If you need extra movement speed to dodge skill shots from scarier laners like Leona or Thresh, you can also finish your Sorc Shoes after Lost Chapter. Otherwise, build them after the full Luden's is done. After that, you'll go for Horizon Focus and Void Staff. And then your last 2 items will be Rabadon's Death Cap and then 1 situational item, but generally it's a defensive one like Banshee's Veil or Zhonya's Hourglass. Now, part of what makes sleeper OP picks so successful is the fact that nobody really plays them. Objectively speaking, they may not be better than or even as good as some of the most popular picks, but of course, when your opponent doesn't know how to play against them, you get the extra edge in the fight. But I've said this before and I'll say it again, that alone is not enough to win you all of your solo queue games. You also need to learn how to get those early leads to begin with, and then also how to transition those leads into winning games. And that is what our coaches can teach you at ProGuides.com. They can work with you one-on-one to figure out exactly what you need to work on, and they're also available 24/7, so it's never a bad time to check them out. Plus, you only got like 1 week left in the season, so it's better get cracking. But anyway, back to our sleeper OP picks. Our next one is Crit Xin Zhao. Xin's buffs earlier in the season made him an incredibly oppressive pick. He's one of the strongest early game champs in the game with insane dueling power and ganks. Then with a combination of Conqueror and Gore Drinker, he didn't really have to deal with the hard falloff that he used to have. But with Conqueror and Gore Drinker taking some pretty big nerfs on 11.21, he's having a harder time scaling into fights if you don't snowball insanely hard early. But this crit build makes it so that you never fall off. Instead of skirmishing early and becoming a frontliner for your team later, this build makes you a straight-up assassin. Landing a W on any squishy champion is basically a guaranteed kill. The one thing about this build is that you're obviously a complete glass cannon, but that doesn't really matter too much. Most of the time, you'll be going for solo kills on isolated enemies or fighting small skirmishes. If he does come down to team fighting, your ult will buy you plenty of time to one-shot a high-priority target, and as long as you're not chain CC'd, you'll constantly be healing up through any damage that you take. So let's take a look at the build that you'll be wanting to go for with Crit Xin Zhao. For runes, you'll take Hail of Blades, Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Relentless Hunter, Triumph, and Alacrity, with the stat runes being Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Armor. Conqueror is still the better rune for extended fighting, but again, you're playing Xin like an assassin here. Hail of Blades allows you to instantly get off all 3 Q strikes, which will be more than enough to one-shot any squishy champs that you get a hold of. For items, you want to start with Ember Knife and then build into Immortal Shield Bow as your mythic. For boots, either tanky options or Berserker's Greaves are good, but then after that, you want to go for the Collector, Infinity Edge, and Phantom Dancer. Your last item is up to you. You could go for something to beef you up a bit, like Steric's Gauge, but at this point you might as well go for All-In with Bloodthirster or Lord Dominic's Regards. Now our next sleeper OP pick is one that is rarely played in solo queue, Yorick. Now honestly, there's nothing really crazy about the build here, we're just looking at Yorick as a pick himself. He's really underpicked for how good he is right now, so if you want something that you can abuse for free LP that nobody knows how to play against, you should learn this guy. His lack of popularity means that your opponents won't have much experience dealing with him, and with his unorthodox playstyle, that alone will give you a big edge in the lane. And that's just the icing on the cake since he already completely smashes most melee matchups, especially post level 6 where his ult can zone them completely from farm. And yes, I am speaking from experience here. If a jungler doesn't come to bail out a melee champion, they are literally unable to walk up without taking half their HP for a single CS. And once you start building up a farm lead, it's harder and harder for the enemy team to answer you. With just your mythic done, you can 1v2 if you play it well, specifically as long as your maiden is up. So if they don't shut you down early, you will be an unstoppable force in the side lane. Split pushing is super OP in solo queue right now since teams generally lack coordination to stop it, and this means that you're very easily able to take tower after tower and then eventually just start breaking open the enemy base. Just make sure that you set up waves so that you'll be hitting the turret when Dragon is spawning. So the enemy has to make a choice between either sending several members to stop you or to go for the Drake but give you the turrets that you want. Now let's take a look at the build. For runes, run Grasp of the Undying, Demolish, Conditioning, Unflinching or Overgrowth, Presence of Mind, and Coup de Grace, with the stat runes being Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Armor. For your items, you want to start with Corrupting Potion and then build that into a Divine Sunderer, Steel Caps, or Merc Treads and a Hull Breaker. Against an AD champion, your next two items will be Death Dance and Thornmail, but against an AP opponent, go for Spear of Visage and Titanic Hydra. Your last item can be something situational like Chempunk Chainsword, Sterak's Gauge, or a Dead Man's Plate. Now the next pick that we have is a bit more of a counter pick. We're going to talk about Zac as a mid laner, specifically as a counter to assassins. A lot of mid laners struggle to deal with the volatile champions in that class, so Zac is something that you may want to have in your pocket. He's got really good wave clear and trading thanks to his W spam, which also gives you basically unlimited sustain as long as you keep picking up your blobs. Early on, Zac is as squishy as any other champion, but you'll very quickly reach the point where you're way too tanky for any assassin to do anything against you. And once you reach that point, you are able to straight up bully your opponent, and then easily get constant priority in the lane. This means that you can then easily roam, and with how OP Zac's ganks are, these ganks are pretty usually successful. And if your team has the damage for it, you can even pull off some tower dives. In teamfights, you'll pretty much function just like Zac Jungle. Dive into the enemy team, disrupt the backline, and deal tons of damage, killing any carries that don't get help healing you off of them. But being a mid laner means that you also get a lot more gold and XP than you would in the jungle, so you will be fulfilling that job even easier. With that said, let's take a look at the build that you'll be going for. For runes, you run Aftershock, Font of Life or Demolish, Conditioning, Revitalize, Triumph, and Tenacity, with stat runes being Ability Haste, Adaptive Force, and either Armor or Magic Resist. For items, you'll start with a Doran Shield and then build into Sunfire Aegis. For boots, either Steel Caps or Lucidity are fine, but your next two items will be Thornmail and Spear of Visage, with the order depending on who you're laning against. After that, go for Demonic Embrace for a bit more offensive power, and then top things off with the Warmogs. Zac feels like a really oppressive force if you're an immobile carry and not getting help from your team. He's got sticking power, good damage in extended fights, and it feels like he can just heal through any damage that you're able to put onto him. And that brings us to today's question of the day. What are some other super oppressive champs? And no, this doesn't necessarily mean champs that can just one-shot you with no counterplay. Those are good too, but it can even be champs with CC to the point that you can't even play, or that you can attack for 30 seconds and barely put a dent in their health bar. Whatever your answer, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now finishing off our list, we've got Quinn. Feels like not too long ago that Quinn was a disgustingly strong power pick in the top lane, and honestly, I don't even really remember why she fell off. But either way, she did, and now I can count how many times I've seen her in the past 4 months on one hand. And honestly, that still doesn't make sense to me, because when she is picked, she's doing really well right now. Quinn has always been an insanely hard to deal with lane bully, but with how OP bruiser items and runes have been, even a big early lead on her wouldn't mean too much in the last couple of patches, since her opponent would still be more impactful in teamfights. But with bruisers taking a hard hit recently, she's been able to use her leads much more effectively and actually close out games. One of the things that makes her a super good pick is just how safely she can bully those lanes. We have talked many times about how much we hate Lucian in the solo lanes, and that's because he can very easily throw the entire game with a single death by dashing in at the wrong time. But Quinn is able to go aggro with very minimal risk. Her Q and E allow you to fully disengage from any fight that isn't totally in your favor. And it's also not just that she has an easier time bullying her opponent that makes her so good. She's also able to extend her lead across the entire map a lot faster than most other champs thanks to her roams. And since her ultimate doesn't even have a cooldown, you can go for those roams as often as you like whenever you can. So let's take a look at the build that you'll want. For runes, take Press the Attack, Triumph or Overheal, Bloodline, Coup de Grace or Cutdown, Mana Flow Band, and Absolute Focus, with the stat runes being Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and either Armor or Magic Resist. For items, start with the Doran's Blade and then build that into a Shield Bow and Berserker Greaves. After that, pick up Stormrazor and Infinity Edge, and then go for Lord Dominic's Regards and Bloodthirster. And that wraps things up for our sleeper OP builds that you're missing out on patch 11.22. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you sub so you never miss out on our meta guides and you're always in the loop of what the best picks are. Remember to answer our question of the day in the comments below, but most importantly, best of luck on the Rift, everybody. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next one.